All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another of our daily press conferences. I'm Jesus Garza. I'm the city manager for the city of Victoria. And with me today, we have David Gonzalez, the director for our health department. We have Rick McBrayer and Caitlin Weinheimer, who's the chief of staff for the county. And to kick things off, we're going to have David come up and say a few words, and then we'll pass it down the line. And then, of course, we'll take some questions at the end and start with some, or end with some reminders that we want to reiterate with you today. Dave.
Thank you, Jesus. Appreciate it. Just want to clarify and touch on a few things that we started discussing yesterday. So still, as of right now, still 0 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Victoria County. Again, to touch on the lab testing and specimen collection, to reiterate, we do have testing or the collection of lab specimens, the availability to collect those here and send those off to a lab in the state. Right now we're looking on average about a 2 to 4 day time frame as far as receiving those results back. That's on average, so that may fluctuate a little bit depending on the situation. Right now we're just really want folks to understand to take those, you can start taking those preventative measures right now to help prevent the spread of the illness and other respiratory illnesses in the community right now, such as flu. Again, practice safe hygiene, washing your hands, stay home if you're sick. If you try to keep your distance from those folks who are sick, to not integrate in those communities where those folks are at. Also, if you are feeling sick, get with your primary care provider. If you don't have a primary care provider, you can definitely reach out to one of the urgent care clinics here, the standalone ERs. If you suspect that you may have contracted this virus at some point, get with them, call ahead before you visit, and also let them know that you're heading in so that way they can kind of set up and be ready to run those tests if need be. What we're going to do at this point is really try to encourage folks in that high-risk group, those 65 years or older, those who have comorbidities or pre-existing health conditions that may be really affected if you do contract a virus such as this, to really start practicing some social distancing. If you're sick, if you're again in those risk groups, maybe think about those public gatherings that you're going to be going to. Maybe forego those for a little while. If there's going to be a lot of people there, large groups that may have some sick individuals, definitely think about going or not going to those events at that time. I want to touch on a few things. We had some questions yesterday at the press conference. Folks may have heard the two terms of presumptive positive and a positive. What a presumptive positive is when a state lab or a private lab has actually confirmed that. And then it actually confirmed positive once it gets to the CDC lab. For the sake of disclosing positive cases, we're assuming presumptive positives as positive as well. So we'll be communicating those if that ever comes about. Right now, again, just to reiterate, no confirmed cases in Victoria County, and just really do what you can to protect yourself, protect your family by limiting those those social gatherings, those public mass gatherings if you are in those high risk age groups. And with that, I'm going to go and pass it on to Rick McBrayer, the Emergency Management Coordinator.
Thank you, David. Rick McBrayer, the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City and County of Victoria. Just want to reiterate to everybody as well that we here, by Texas law, have the authority to make local decisions, and so our policymakers, elected officials understand that process and that role. And so we're, every day as the situation changes and it becomes more fluid and we get new information, they're kept up to speed on those decisions they have to make. The community policymakers in Victoria County live here. We raise our families here and are members of this community as well. Decisions we make are in effect are not just for them, but them as persons and persons in our communities. We take everything into effect. We're taking the guidance of our subject matter experts on the COVID-19 situation and are making decisions based upon that knowledge for the betterment of our community. Throughout this planning process and preparation process for the last couple of weeks, we've been mapping out our response plans, our preparedness plans, and even our recovery plans. We want to reassure the public and our community that we are in constant contact with our subject matter experts on the COVID-19, and we will work through this process the best we can in all fashions and forms. We identified trigger points in which we will respond accordingly and make new decisions based upon those trigger points with our subject matter experts and the people that are leading this effort. At that time, I'd like to turn this over to City Manager of the City of Victoria, Jesus Garza.
All right, thank you. I just want to reiterate a couple of points. I think it's important for everybody to hopefully feel confident that we are planning for all different scenarios. I know that yesterday there was a question that was asked about, what would you do if we have a case here in Victoria? And we know what we would do. As an example, we had already taken into account what we would do as this virus and confirmed cases started getting geographically closer to Victoria. And so obviously over the last 48 hours, there's been a couple of cases that have come up in surrounding or close by counties. And as an example of what that trigger caused us is that today we began what we call our liaison aspect of our emergency operations center. And so my two assistant city managers will spearhead that role and begin having more proactive conversation with some of our community stakeholders, whether that's the school district or some of the nonprofits, the church groups, our business leaders. And so this is something that we were prepared to do, that we enacted today in response to some of these cases in our surrounding counties. But I think it's important that hopefully people feel reassured that if it does continue and we do have a case that comes to Victoria, that we have had conversations about what that would mean to us. At the end of the day, it's our job as professionals in this endeavor to take all scenarios into account, but more importantly, also take into account how we would recover from those instances. And so it's not just about, well, how would you react or what would you do once it hits, but it's how do you then continue to push the message that we're striving for in terms of, for lack of a better term, getting us back to normal, right? And that can mean a billion different things for different organizations. And so for us, it's important that we also continue to refocus or remind individuals that we can only do so much, right? We can only do so much as the government entities here in Victoria. It's important that both people on the personal side or even maybe as business leaders or leaders of different organizations take it upon themselves to make some of those decisions on their own with the information that they have available. I also want to take a moment to reiterate what was mentioned yesterday related to the panic purchasing. We continue to experience that today, and so we want to remind folks to hopefully take a breather and be cognizant that this is not a hurricane. This is a completely different situation. The supply chain for for all of the stores would continue to be intact, and so we ask people to continue to be conscious and be aware and be mindful that there are others that are also needing some of these food supplies or even toilet paper. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Caitlin Weinheimer with the Victoria County.
Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Weinheimer. I'm the Chief of Staff for Victoria County and one of the main public information officers for COVID-19. I just want to hit on our hospitals and jail and juvenile detention facilities. So Victoria hospitals have modified their visitation policies in response to COVID-19, and we'd just like to direct people to those respective agencies for any specifics to that. Right now, juvenile detention is fully operational and are only intaking local juveniles. So right now they're conducting intake monitoring and screening and following the precautionary measures given to them by local health officials. And right now, visitation is closed to the public, but in this case, to make sure they maintain communication with their families, they've instituted measures such as video conferencing and then also expanding phone privileges to make sure they're in contact with their families. The chief told me that the county jail is fully operational and open to any criminals in the Victoria area that would like to go there. So right now, the incarceration of inmates from outside the Victoria area is on a case-by-case basis. They are doing intake monitoring and screening and are also following precautionary measures from local health officials. Visitation to the jail is closed to the public at this time, and we're going to kind of open it up for any questions you guys may have at this point.
Have you guys been communicating with the surrounding counties as well about confirmed cases in addition to the ones that we know about in Yoakum and in Matagorda County? Have there been any other ones?
So I'm going to direct that to our health director, David Gonzalez.
Yeah, so the question was, I want to repeat the question so folks at home can hear it. The question was if we're in contact with other regional and other counties around us for confirmed cases. Yes, we are. on several aspects. One from the health department side, we're in touch with our regional health department, Department of State Health Services, as well on the hospital side. We have the Golden Crescent Medical Operations Center here that actually serves the Victoria County and surrounding counties, or who are in touch with those healthcare facilities also on a regular basis, daily.
And so in addition to those 2 cases, do we know of any others that are presumed positive?
Right now, I haven't heard any confirmation from any kind of presumptive or confirmed positives of those. Any more questions?
So you guys started a public hotline yesterday. How many calls have you received on that as of right now?
So it's important to, as a reminder, so that hotline, we did announce it yesterday, but it actually goes into effect tomorrow. And so the schedule for that hotline is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to noon, and then 1 to 5 p.m. And as a reminder, that number is 361-580-5796. I'll repeat, 361-580-5796. I would anticipate that over the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have a better sense of the call volume. We'll have a better sense of, common questions or inquiries that we're receiving through that hotline. And if we find consistencies in terms of the issues, we'll discuss them and bring them forward in the setting, similar to what we've tried to do with questions that we see funneled through Facebook or even things that have come up from some of you as well.
So yesterday, the city of Austin implemented a ban on gatherings of over 250 people. Is that something or something along those lines that the city of Victoria is considering?
As was mentioned earlier, we have the ability to make decisions that best benefit our community. Regardless of what communities are doing outside of Victoria, we're not really taking that into account. They're completely different situations, different scenarios. Obviously, the cities are larger; they have more gatherings. For instance, I know that some cities put these limitations on mass gatherings of 500 people or 250 people. Well, in Victoria, the number of gatherings that include 500 people or greater are probably very small, right? And so we need to be realistic that not everything applies across the board. But at the end of the day, we're going to be making the decisions, our policymakers will be making the decision that best fits our situation. And as has been communicated over the last several days and even today, that we're really relying on some of that guidance from CDC. And so we anticipate that if we get to the point where there is a community transmission case in Victoria County, that we will be looking at some of those measures. But at this point, there is no confirmation of any community transmission case in Victoria, and so there is no reason for that to occur, and that's coming from our health authority and also from our policymakers. But we are prepared in the background, right, if we ever get to that point and need to do that, that we have all our ducks lined up in a row in order to enact quickly and efficiently.
So obviously, we've already talked about people staying home if they're sick this week from work. Are you guys recommending at least social distancing or anything along those lines?
Sure. I'll let David repeat what he said earlier.
Yeah, sure. The question was recommendations for social distancing. And yeah, absolutely, especially for those at-risk groups, 65 and older, pre-existing health conditions, absolutely want to recommend they kind of maybe want to keep their distance from those social gatherings where there's going to be a lot of folks, and just to really reduce that risk. Again, we can't, emphasize it enough. If you're sick, with some sort of a contagious illness, stay home. And that's across the board. That's flu season. That's, COVID-19 situation currently with the pandemic. Just to really reduce the risk of those other folks in the community and really making that transmission rate higher, to really reduce that, just encourage them to stay home.
So, of course, we pinned out people over 60, 65.
Mm-hmm.
Are we not so much stressing that for people who are younger or not in this at-risk population?
Yeah, so and going along with what Hate's, again, sorry to repeat the question, asking about other populations, not just with the high risk. It's important to remember everybody can be a carrier of this virus, and that's a good question. So we're trying to, obviously, that's where the hygiene part comes in, and that's where, washing your hands, again, staying home if you're sick. Try not to be a carrier either to go back. If you go back home to a high-risk individual, or if you're going to a facility such as a hospital or nursing home and things like that, we really want to reduce exposure to the whole community, and we've got to do our part. We've got to keep ourselves, obviously our hands clean so we're not spreading that virus. And that is the part those folks in the lower risk definitely have to play, because even though the I guess symptoms aren't as severe on those other groups, you definitely can be a carrier to those other high-risk groups, so that's where we need to do our part in that.
The South Texas Blood Bank issued an alert of a critical blood shortage because some of the drives are being canceled. Should people go and give blood as a way to help in this emergency, or do you know if blood banks are screening people for the COVID-19 or anything like that?
The question was regarding blood banks and the capacity currently, and if they encourage that. I don't want to speak on their behalf. I think we can definitely get a representative, on board in the EOC here, hopefully tomorrow, and get those questions answered. And then we'll bring that answer back tomorrow's press conference. I think that'd be good.
A lot of our readers, a lot of stuff that we've been seeing just online and from a lot of the community is that people are not necessarily concerned about this. They think it's like a media hype, or they think that it's not something that they personally are very concerned about. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, again, the question was just in general media hype, what my thoughts were on that as far as how serious we think the situation is. So on our end, we're taking it very seriously. However, we do think there needs to be a balance there of, not panicking, but not overlooking this. It's a serious, virus. We've seen, what it can do to the high-risk individuals. We need to be cognizant of that and be aware. We need to be vigilant on slowing down, stopping the spread of it. So we are locally taking it very seriously. We're looking and planning ahead, like City Manager had mentioned. But again, we want to discourage the panic part, and that goes into the panic shopping and buying supplies up. But again, on the flip side, make sure you have what you need at home. Make sure you have your prescription medications. Make sure you have what you need for a week or two of supply. But there's no reason to do the panicking, I guess, side of that.
As far as like the masks and that kind of thing, a lot of times for people, unless they're ill, that's not really a recommended measure. What about for immunosuppressed people? Is that something that they should be going out and buying from the stores right now?
I think that'd be, depending on their situation, they probably need to get with their healthcare provider on that if they recommend that. Definitely if their healthcare provider recommends they do wear a mask, then I would encourage that as well. I would encourage going and buying a bunch from the stores by any means. As you know, and in the media, I guess has already portrayed that very well as far as the shortage of those masks across the world. So we want to make sure those are going to the people that really need it, such as healthcare providers, first responders, and then those that are sick and may have been prescribed or may have been advised to wear those. So I would leave that up to their individual healthcare providers to advise on.
Have you guys been in contact with the grocery stores or any of their suppliers? Are you guys considering maybe phasing out or doing like assigned times by zone for when you can go to the grocery store, something like that, to help with stocks?
So I'm going to let you
Sure.
want to take that one, Jesus?
So we have had contact with predominantly Walmart and H-E-B individuals representing, and of course they're the biggest retailer grocers in our community, and they've assured us that there are no issues with the supply chain. And obviously there are private entities, and so it's not our job to convey to them or mandate of them to have whatever schedule that they need to have. Obviously they've both chosen to adjust their hours in order to accommodate a time period for them to cleanse the stores and also restock. But that came from them, right? We did not mandate that of them, and so keep in mind that they are also private entities. And they're doing what they need to do in order to meet the demand. And obviously it's in everybody's best interest, theirs, the communities, everybody, that they figure it out, right? And they are committed to continuing to figure it out. But there have not been any conversations, to be clear, about, splitting the community into zones or anything like that.
So again, this is something just to give more specific scenarios as to the type of things people should be doing or shouldn't be doing right now. Just for example, like going to the movies, going to work, going to restaurants, anything like that. Like for the general public, we're not saying don't go do those things right now. We're saying just life is normal.
Sure, and I'll repeat the question, and I apologize that I haven't done that with the previous questions. But the question was, in essence, what would we recommend to the average Joe resident in terms of their daily life, whether it's going to work, to the movies, grocery store, et cetera. And I think our message has been fairly consistent over the last few days, which is we recognize that people, or not recognize, we encourage people to make their own decisions for their scenario, for their individual case. As has been mentioned, there are certain sectors in our community that are more vulnerable to this, and so obviously if they fall within that category, then it probably makes sense for them to take some precautions that maybe you and I wouldn't, right? And so I think it's important that there's a personal responsibility aspect of this, that people stay informed and they make a decisions that's good for themselves. But we are not in any way, shape, or form, mandating that things close down or that things stop happening. We are not there.
So just to make sure it's clear for all of our audiences, so if you are showing symptoms of what you think could be the coronavirus, then do you call the hotline before going to a hospital or medical provider?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that, sure. So the question is if you're showing signs or symptoms of COVID, if you should call the hotline first. No, we still go ahead and go with those same lines of communication. Contact your healthcare provider. Let them know the situation if you're showing signs and symptoms. We're not encouraging everyone to go to the ER either. Definitely if it is an emergency, call 911 if it's to that extent. But if you're just showing signs and symptoms of the illness, call your healthcare provider. If you don't have a healthcare provider, there's definitely other avenues to go. You can call, one of the walk-in clinics. And I think, even call if you get to the point where you need a standalone ER, you can go there as well. If you have questions, absolutely, you can call the hotline and we can get, hopefully, somebody from the health department to answer. Definitely we're not treating patients, obviously, at the health department. But, if you're showing minor symptoms, feel free, need information, feel free to call the hotline. But if you're seeking treatment, go ahead and go with your medical provider.
CDC website.
Yes, and thanks, Rick. And then what Rick had mentioned is, and just for more information, go to those same, outlets that we've been pushing for the past month and a half or so. Go to our Facebook page, Victoria County Health Department Facebook page or website, Victoria TXOEM. There's also that redirects to the coronavirus website. Department of State Health Services and CDC all have great resources to help answer some of those questions.
In Matagorda County, that case is suspected community spread. Would you advise, obviously we have a lot of people who travel to our surrounding counties frequently. Would you advise people not to go to Matagorda County at this time?
I can't confirm. I have not heard that it's community spread yet. I'll definitely look into it. So I would just have to wait to answer that one. I'm not aware right now.
If that were community spread and that were confirmed, I believe that's from one of the press releases that I've seen it reported several places, but does that change anything?
Yeah, then one thing that Jesus was touching on a little bit, and I think Rick may have touched on it a little bit, is our plans are very fluid and they're based on situations. Not only, sorry to repeat the question, was asked regarding the Matagorda case. If it's community transmission, does that affect our guidance essentially? And yeah, our guidance is going to be based on things that are happening here locally and in the contiguous and surrounding counties in the region. Depending on the situation, if there's widespread community transmission in counties around us, then we'll definitely tailor our guidance too. That will change. We'll look at cases here locally, cases elsewhere. Again, if we have cases widespread in Texas, widespread community transmission, then we're going to go ahead and adopt our plans and our strategies and talking points at that point. Right now, we don't have direct guidance regarding that case because we're not, we're really sure that's the first I'm hearing about possible community transmission. Again, can't confirm that, so I don't want to address that directly.
Do we know what widespread might mean?
Yeah, so widespread is going to be there's large-scale community transmission, multiple cases in multiple areas in the county, in the state. Up in, I think Washington State may have had widespread. New York may be facing that as well. I'd have to look back and see exactly what they classified that as. But if there's a lot of transmission amongst community members where they can't pinpoint it to a direct traveler or a point of origin, if they don't have any link epidemiologically, then that's going to really be, classified as a widespread transmission at that point.
So more than trying to put a number on it, like more than 2 or 3, we're talking.
Yeah, and it's difficult to put an exact number on it. It's going to be community-based. Smaller communities, you may have lower numbers. It's more so rates versus actual numbers, and that's going to vary based on community size.
David, can you touch on if somebody doesn't have a primary care provider?
Yeah, and just to reiterate earlier, if you don't have primary care provider, feel free to reach out to some of the clinics here. local urgent care clinics or some of the standalone ERs to get the treatment and if need be. And then if you have questions regarding that, if you need any help, feel free to call the hotline and we can direct that question. And the hotline number again was 361-580-5796 for the hotline number.
So I know you guys said no confirmed cases in Victoria County
Correct.
as of this point.
Mhm.
Have you guys, how many tests have we sent off?
Yeah,
Right now?
and that goes back to the classification of persons under investigation, and that's a number we don't disclose based on guidance from Department of State Health Services.
And so, I mean, just again, sorry to do this.
That's all right. No, you're good.
My
You're good.
nervousness.
We understand.
Do you know if any results have been sent to the CDC right now, or are those just being sent to private or state health facilities or testing facilities?
Again, to repeat this question, I forgot to repeat the other one. Are we aware of any tests that have been sent to the CDC? Right now, the process for testing is going to be we'd send tests, and this is across state, this is not just Victoria County. We send tests to a state lab, or now that these private labs are coming online, those tests are going to go to them. Once they get classified or presumptive positive by them, then from what I understand, as of late, the latest guidance would be, then it would go to CDC at that point. But again, I can't comment on numbers. Yes.
Do you know of any nonprofit or entity that needs volunteers or community support in any way at this time?
What's this?
Sure.
All right,
Yeah. So we'll probably have a better answer to that question in the next 24 to 48 hours. As I alluded to earlier today, we began the process of establishing a liaison program. And so over the next 24 hours, we'll have more direct contact with some of the nonprofits in our community. And so we'll have a better sense of that at that time.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, all right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'll just reiterate a couple of points. I'll repeat the phone number for the information hotline, 361-580-5796. And as a reminder, those hours are 8 to noon and 1 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. The website where you can get more information is, of course, you could always go to the CDC, but our local page is victoriatxoem.org, and there people could find links through CDC. You know, you asked a question about, Matagorda County. If people wanted to get some type of guidance on what locations they maybe should not travel to in terms of their personal travel, that information is all on the site, so we encourage people to do that. And of course, on a daily basis, there are updates that are being put out on the Victoria County Public Health Department Facebook page, so keep an eye on that. And we will continue to have these press briefings every day at 3 p.m. And so if there is anything else, that is all for today. Thank you.